Time, and I call the honourable member for Deakin.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's a good opportunity for me to speak this afternoon on the Australian Securities and Investments Commission Amendment, Corporations and Market Advisory Committee Abolition Bill. And as former speakers have said, and as the name suggests, the purpose of the amendment is to cease the operations of CAMAC, along with its legal committee, which was initially set up in 1991. The bill proposes that the operations and functions of CAMAC will cease within 28 days after royal assent. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, through this bill, the government is in a small, I'll concede, but important way fulfilling two of the key commitments that we made prior to the election. The first, getting the budget back in order and paying back Labor's monstrous debt, and secondly, seeking to provide a more streamlined, lean and efficient government. And listening to members opposite, I have some sympathy for aspects of their complaints, but one of the chorus of complaints that comes from those opposite is that this is only a $2.8 million saving to the budget and is therefore completely unnecessary. And I think it was ultimately that kind of thinking that has us on a trajectory of $667 billion of debt, that each one of those $1 million doesn't matter. Well, we've taken the view in reviewing the operations of government that in order to be lean, in order to operate as small a government as we possibly can, that we must look everywhere, and CAMAC is part of that. So the $2.8 million of savings over the forward estimates with respect to the abolition of CAMAC is important. But those two aims, getting the budget back under control and striving for ever leaner government, are two very interconnected aims. With respect to the budget, we know on this side of the House that in order to repair the budget, a lot of work has to be done. And no amount of obfuscation or ignoring the problem from members opposite will make it go away, and it can't be wished away. It's quite opportunistic for those opposites to just wish it all away and pretend that there is no problem, but there is. And it's salient to always remember the key facts, because if we had completely unrestrained ability to generate revenue, government decisions might well be different. But at the moment, we're borrowing over $1 billion each and every month just to pay back the debt left by Labor. $1 billion each month, rising to $3 billion if debt is not restrained in the future. The other quite scary thing is that we're paying $1 billion of interest a month now, with record low interest rates and record low debt rates for governments accessing debt. If what I suspect will happen in the not-too-distant future, interest rates rise, it's actually quite scary to think what the debt levels and interest burden that Australian taxpayers will have to bear. And for every dollar of interest that we pay to a foreign lender, that's $1 less that goes to a school or a hospital. So I just caution members opposite from scoffing at the savings that come out of this bill, the $2.8 million of savings over the forward estimates. Sure, it's not sheep stations, but we have to look at every area of government, and in some respects we need to make tough decisions between competing objectives. As some economists have forecasted, and I read this in the paper on the weekend, within just a few decades' time, government debt in Australia will be as large as about 50% of the economy, and could rise to over 100% of our annual GDP. So, again, the thinking that pervades members opposite that we can ignore those problems and not try to tackle them even with quite sensible and small measures like the abolition of CAMAC, I would caution them against that. The bill before us today, as I said, fulfils a commitment made as part of the budget process. I've alluded to the $2.8 million of savings over the forward estimates, and while this figure is a standalone figure and does seem low, ceasing the operations of small bodies and committees such as the CAMAC, which was set up in '91 and I think in essence began operating to a degree in 1978, generates savings beyond merely the saving involved in the annual appropriation. As we all see from our committee work and all of the oversight that goes into bodies such as this, the ongoing operation of small agencies like CAMAC absorbs resources across the wider Commonwealth Public Service, and the oversight and administrative costs are obviously on top of the direct appropriations of $2.8 million. So, I mean, the savings are somewhat larger than that. But when these cost savings are multiplied across the federal government in entirety, we're talking about a big number. And one of the scary things that we realised when we came into government was we asked the bureaucrats, please give us a list of every committee and every body that the federal government funds or administers in some way. We couldn't get that list. We could not get a definitive list of every single committee or body that is funded by the Commonwealth Government. Now, if that doesn't tell you that we need to put a ruler over bodies such as CAMAC, then I don't know what does. So, again, I think this is a very sensible change. And the decision to abolish CAMAC, along with a number of other government bodies in that big list that no one could actually give us, also fulfils the second commitment that I alluded to earlier, and that's to deliver a leaner, more efficient government sector. The abolition of government bodies like CAMAC will improve coordination and accountability, reduce the costs associated with separate governance arrangements, and increase efficiency in how public funds are utilised. It's always going to be pretty tough to walk into this chamber and try and convince the Australian Labor Party that we should have a smaller, leaner government, because ingrained in their DNA is bigger bureaucracies, bigger governments, government funding of any body is much more preferable to allowing private enterprise or private experts provide the type of service that CAMAC has provided. I also think the members opposite today, in their comments, that ingrained ideology has come through in saying that government will not be able to source the kind of advice provided by CAMAC in any other way. And that also impugns every private sector individual involved with CAMAC. For people involved in business, professional bodies, the legal professional bodies, the accounting professional bodies, they will continue to provide independent advice to government. And if we can't consult with the private sector, presumably those opposite are arguing that we should set up bodies in every conceivable field of public policy and get advice from them, because there's no point consulting with private enterprise or industry bodies or the Law Council or any of the other professional bodies. So I think that doesn't meet any test of scrutiny. But as members of our government are aware, we are proud of the fact that we have removed thousands of pages of regulation and slashed more than $2 billion in business regulatory compliance costs. And I know those opposite are sick of hearing that, but that is something that we are very proud of as being a huge achievement in the first year of government, and ultimately allows business to spend less time and money dealing with regulation and more on creating new jobs. So our smaller and more rational government reforms, of which this bill is a part, forms a key component of our important deregulatory agenda. As former speakers have said, CAMAC was established through reforming and renaming previously existing bodies with the purpose of providing advice to the government on matters relating to the reform of corporations and other financial and securities-related legislation. This was part of an effort to bring about a national framework for corporations and securities regulations in the 1980s. The CAMAC and its predecessors provided the Commonwealth with an independent group of corporate experts who could provide advice in this area on the progress of the implementation of the newly unified laws in that particular area. The body also sought to provide an avenue for the industry to voice its views and concerns on any proposed changes or reforms seen as desirable in the area of corporations and financial law. So, for the reasons I've outlined earlier, we don't believe the case is justifiable to a taxpayer-funded committee of this nature due to the availability of other more important bodies who have already provide a role in performing this function. And whilst we do recognise the important contribution that CAMAC has had over the years to law reform in these areas, this bill recognises that the business and economic environment has changed since the agency was first established in 1991. And as I've said earlier to members opposite, we're fully confident in the professionalism and capability of business and industry groups to make their case to government without the need for additional bureaucracy. The abolition of CAMAC will not prevent or hinder, therefore, the ability of the business community, experts, those people who are engaged in professional bodies, whether they be lawyers, accountants, bankers or others, with advising to government in good faith what they believe is in the best interests of that particular policy area. With the passage of this bill, the government will also continue to seek independent and high-quality advice where necessary, ensuring that advice provided is practical and evidence-based through utilising the specialist relevant expertise, such as has already happened, whether that be through panels or other appointees and industry experts. After the abolition of this body, the Treasury's Markets Group, as other members have also highlighted earlier, will continue to advise the government on matters of corporate law, financial markets and financial services. And this advice will continue to be informed by regular engagement with the broader industry and relevant experts in the field. Further, ASIC will retain the ability to provide advice to the government of the day, whoever that may be, with matters associated with amendment or law reform in these areas, and it already happens. None of the ASIC's functions will be altered as a result of this bill. Of course, the government will also be able to refer matters to the Productivity Commission, as well as the Australian Law Reform Commission, to assist in any work that's required. Both of these bodies have previously completed reviews on matters such as the regulatory burden of business, insolvency law and relatively recently managed investment schemes. So I do believe, and the government believes, that when all of that is taken into account, this is a sensible bill, given the changing economic circumstances, and it fulfils, as I said, two of the government's key aims, and that is leaner, more efficient government, less red tape, and also to provide for reasonable savings to the budget. So in the case of CAMAC, the evidence is apparent to me that there are numerous other government agencies who will be able to and be more than capable of performing the tasks that CAMAC now holds, and therefore I see this as an absolutely sensible bill which fulfils a commitment we made at the time of the budget, and I therefore commend the bill to that.